The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was built to make visitors feel small. Its walls stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Light came from floating crystals that the Velthari had grown over thousands of years. Every surface was polished until it shone like water under moonlight. Representatives from 12 powerful species sat in a circle, each one on a throne that matched their body. Some thrones held water for the fish-like Moravi. Others had special air for species that breathed different gases. In the center of this circle stood 2 humans, looking very small and very alone. Admiral Te Wu-jin kept his back straight and his face calm. He was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short in military style. His uniform was dark blue with silver buttons, clean and pressed. Behind him stood Captain Hana Su, a woman of 40 with sharp eyes and hands that wanted to become fists. She had to work hard to keep them open and relaxed at her sides. The Velthari High Speaker rose from his throne. He was tall, almost 3 meters, and his body was made of living crystal that glowed with soft purple light. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire hall without any need for machines to make it louder. "The Council has reached its decision," the High Speaker said. "The petition from the human species for equal voting rights is denied. Furthermore, the Council has approved the Velthari claim to the Orion Spur region. All human settlements in this area must be removed within 30 galactic cycles." Hana Su took a sharp breath. The Orion Spur was home. Earth was there. Mars was there. Every colony humanity had built over 300 years was there. 8 billion people lived in that region of space, and now they were being told to leave. "You may relocate to the Outer Veil," the High Speaker continued. "This region is unclaimed. No other species wants it. You should be grateful that we offer you anything at all." The Outer Veil. Te Wu-jin knew what that meant. It was the edge of the galaxy, where stars were few and far between, cold, dark, and empty. Other species called it the graveyard of space. Nothing lived there. Nothing grew there. It was where the galaxy went to die. Around the circle, the other species watched with different expressions. The Krith, who looked like giant insects with 6 arms and hard shells, seemed amused. Their clicking laughter echoed through the hall. The Moravi floated in their water thrones, their long tentacles waving slowly. They did not seem to care at all. The Draven, tall beings with 4 eyes and gray skin, looked away as if embarrassed. A few others showed small signs of sympathy, but none of them spoke. "Do the humans have anything to say?" the High Speaker asked. His tone made it clear that he expected nothing. Humans never fought back. In 300 years of membership in the Galactic Collective, they had accepted every insult, every unfair law, every denial of their rights. They complained sometimes, but they always obeyed in the end. Te Wu-jin stepped forward. Every eye in the hall turned to him. He could feel the weight of their attention, the casual cruelty of beings who saw his entire species as nothing more than useful servants. "We understand," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "We will begin preparations immediately." That was all. No anger, no tears, no desperate arguments, just acceptance. The High Speaker's crystal body flickered with surprise. Even he had expected something more. A protest, perhaps. A request for more time. Something. "Very well," the High Speaker said, after a moment of silence. "This session is concluded." Te Wu-jin bowed his head slightly, then turned and walked toward the exit. Hana Su followed him, her boots clicking against the polished floor. The doors opened before them, tall and heavy, made of metal that came from a dead star. They walked through without looking back. Behind them, the council members began to talk among themselves. "That was easier than expected," said the Krith representative, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "I thought the little mammals would at least cry." "They know their place," another replied. "They have always known their place." The High Speaker said nothing. He watched the doors close behind the humans, and for a moment, something like doubt crossed his ancient mind, but he pushed it away. Humans were weak. Everyone knew this. They lived short lives, barely a century if they were lucky. They were soft, made of meat and water, easy to hurt and easy to kill. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. The only reason the collective had allowed them to join was because they were useful. They worked hard. They fixed things. They solved small problems, so that greater species did not have to bother with them, and now they would go to the outer veil and slowly fade away, as all weak species eventually did. Outside the Great Hall, Tae Woojin and Hana Su walked in silence until they reached their shuttle. It was a small ship, simple and functional, nothing like the grand vessels of the other species. Once inside, with the doors sealed and the engines warming up, Hana finally spoke. "How could you just accept that?" she demanded. "How could you bow your head and say nothing? They are taking everything from us." Tae Woojin sat down in the pilot's chair and began the launch sequence. His face was still calm, but now there was something else in his eyes. Something that Hana had never seen before. "Did you notice," he said quietly, "that the Velthari environmental systems were designed by human engineers? Did you notice that the translation devices they use were programmed by human scientists? Did you notice that the medicine that keeps the High Speaker's crystal body from cracking was developed by human doctors?" Hana stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Tae Woojin replied, "that they have forgotten something very important. They have forgotten that we are not just their servants. We are the ones who keep everything running, and they just told us to leave." The shuttle lifted off, rising through the atmosphere of the council world. Below them, the great cities of the Velthari glittered like jewels. Above them, the stars waited, cold and patient. "We have been preparing for this moment for 120 years, Tae Woojin said. "Every insult, every denial, every unfair law, we have endured them all because we knew this day would come. They think they are sending us into exile. They think they are punishing us." He turned to look at Hana, and now she could see it clearly. The fire that burned behind his calm expression. "They have no idea what they have done." Hana sat down slowly, her anger fading into something else. Understanding. And beneath that, a dark and patient hope. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Tae Woojin said, "we go home. We pack our things. We leave quietly, politely, without causing any trouble. And we let them discover, in their own time, exactly how much they needed us." The shuttle turned toward the distant stars where humanity waited. Behind them, the Galactic Council celebrated another successful meeting. Completely unaware that they had just made the greatest mistake in their long and proud history, the ships began to move within days of the Council's decision. Thousands of vessels, large and small, lifted from planets and stations across the Orion Spur. They carried families with children. Old people who remembered Earth before humanity reached the stars. Young couples who had never known any home but the colonies. 8 billion souls packed their lives into boxes and containers, said goodbye to the places where they had been born, and turned their faces toward the dark edge of the galaxy. Dr. Yuna Ki watched the migration from the command deck of the UESC Endurance, one of the largest ships in the human fleet. She was 73 years old, small and thin, with white hair pulled back in a simple knot. Her eyes were dark and sharp, the eyes of someone who had spent her entire life watching and waiting and planning. She had been one of the founders of the project. The secret plan that had been growing in the shadows for more than a century. Now, at last, she was seeing it come to life. "The Krith have sent probes to follow our convoy," Lieutenant Sung Ho reported. He was young, barely 30. But he had been chosen for this mission because of his skill with sensors and communications. "They are tracking our course and speed." "Good," Yuna said. "Let them watch. They will see exactly what they expect to see. Refugees running away to die in the dark." Through the wide windows of the command deck, she could see the other ships of the convoy stretching out in a long line. Cargo vessels heavy with supplies, colony ships packed with sleeping passengers, engineering ships carrying the machines that would build new homes on new worlds. To any observer, it looked like a defeated species fleeing into exile, but looks could be deceiving. "Status report on the special cargo," Yuna said quietly. Sung Ho checked his console. "All sealed containers are secure. Temperature and pressure are stable. No signs of detection from external scans." Yuna nodded. The sealed containers held the real treasures of humanity. Not gold or jewels, but something far more valuable. Data crystals containing every piece of knowledge humanity had ever gathered, seeds from every plant that had ever grown on Earth, genetic samples from every animal, every fish, every insect, medical formulas that human scientists had developed over centuries, engineering blueprints that human builders had perfected through generations of hard work. Everything that made humanity what it was, preserved and protected and ready to be planted in new soil. The other species had never understood this about humans. They saw only the short lives, the soft bodies, the emotional reactions. They did not see the stubborn determination that had carried humanity from caves to stars. They did not see the patience that could span generations, the ability to plant seeds that would not bloom for 100 years. They did not see the quiet anger that burned beneath the polite smiles and bowed heads. In another part of the fleet, Captain Hanasu supervised the loading of the last shuttles from the Mars colony. The red planet had been humanity's first step into space, the place where they had learned to live on worlds other than Earth. Now it was being emptied, every building shut down, every machine turned off, every garden sealed away. "That's the last of them," her second officer reported. "All personnel are aboard. Mars is empty." Hana looked out at the rust-colored surface one final time. She had been born here, in a small dome near the Great Canyon of Valles Marineris. Her mother had died here. Her father had built one of the first atmospheric processors here, and now she was leaving it behind for aliens who did not deserve it. "Set course for the outer veil," she said. "Maximum speed." The Velthari had given them 30 cycles to leave. Humanity was going to do it in 15. Let the Council wonder why they were in such a hurry. Let them think it was fear. The truth was something else entirely. Back on Earth, the last preparations were being made. The great cities stood empty, their streets clean and silent. Parks and forests had been carefully maintained, every tree and flower left in perfect health. The oceans were clean, the air was pure, the soil was rich. Earth was a paradise, the most beautiful planet in the Orion Spur, and humanity was giving it up without a fight. Dae-hyun was the last person to leave. He was 55 years old, a gardener who had spent his life tending the parks of what was once called Seoul. He walked slowly through the empty streets, remembering the sounds of children playing, the smell of food cooking, the feeling of rain on his face. All gone now, all silent. He stopped at a small hill in the center of the city, a place where cherry trees had bloomed every spring for 1,000 years. The trees were still there, their branches bare in the winter air but ready to flower when spring came. He knelt down and dug a small hole in the frozen ground with his bare hands. From his pocket, he took a small device, no bigger than his thumb. It looked like nothing special, just a piece of metal with a few blinking lights. But inside it was something the Velthari and all their advanced technology could not match. It was a message, written in a code that only humans could understand. A promise, a warning, a seed planted in the soil of Earth that would bloom when the time was right. "We will come back," Dae-hyun whispered in Korean, the old language that humanity had carried from their first home. "Maybe not me, maybe not my children, but someday, our people will return, and when we do, we will remember everything." He covered the device with soil and stood up slowly, his knees aching from the cold. Then he walked to the waiting shuttle and climbed aboard. The doors closed behind him, the engines fired, and Earth grew smaller and smaller in the window until it was just another star in the endless dark. The Galactic Collective celebrated humanity's departure with a grand feast. The Velthari claimed the Orion Spur and all its riches. The Krith divided humanity's former trade routes among themselves. The Moravi took the water-rich moons where human scientists had once grown food for 100 worlds. Everyone was happy. Everyone was satisfied. The annoying little mammals were gone, and now the real powers of the galaxy could do as they pleased. None of them noticed the silence that followed. At first, it was small things. A communication relay that stopped working, a water filter that needed to be replaced, a navigation computer that gave wrong directions. Small problems, easily fixed, nothing to worry about. But the problems kept coming, and the people who usually fixed them were gone. In the outer veil, far from the light of the collective stars, the human fleet flew on through the darkness. They did not look back. They did not send messages. They simply disappeared into the black, like ghosts fading into the night. And in the sealed containers of the UESC Endurance, the seeds of a new civilization waited patiently for their chance to grow. 5 galactic cycles passed, and the Velthari began to notice that something was wrong. It started with the atmospheric processors. These were giant machines that kept the air clean and breathable on hundreds of colony worlds. They had been running perfectly for centuries, humming along day and night, never breaking down, never causing problems. But now they were starting to fail. Not all at once, not in big explosions or dramatic disasters. Just small failures, tiny breakdowns that added up over time. On the colony world of Velthas Prime, the main processor began to produce air that smelled slightly wrong. Engineers were sent to fix it. They opened the machine and looked inside. But they could not understand what they were seeing. The design was too complex. The parts were too strange. They replaced what they could and closed it up again. But the smell remained. Who built this machine? The chief engineer asked. The answer came back from the historical records. Human engineers. 200 years ago, more failures followed. Water purifiers stopped working properly. Power generators began to overheat. Communication systems developed strange delays that no one could explain. Each time, the Velthari sent their best engineers to investigate. Each time, the engineers came back confused and frustrated. The Krith faced worse problems. Their entire economy was built on trade, on moving goods from one end of the galaxy to the other. They had the fastest ships and the most efficient routes, but those routes depended on navigation systems that had been programmed and maintained by human technicians. Without those technicians, the systems began to drift. Ships started arriving late. Some arrived at the wrong destinations entirely. A cargo vessel carrying medicine ended up in an asteroid field on the other side of the collective. A passenger liner full of important diplomats got lost for 3 weeks in deep space. Insurance costs went up. Customers went elsewhere. The great Krith trading houses began to lose money for the first time in their long history. High Commander Bora Jin had warned them. She was a human woman who had served as the official contact between humanity and the Krith Trade Federation for 30 years. Before leaving with the rest of her people, she had stood before the Krith leaders and spoken words that they had laughed at then. Human engineers designed 80% of your environmental systems, she had said. Human programmers wrote the basic code for your navigation networks. Human doctors developed treatments for 17 diseases that affect your species. You have built your civilization on a foundation that we created, and now you are throwing us away. The Krith had clicked their mandibles in amusement. We will find others to do this work. They had replied, you are not special. You are replaceable. Now, 5 cycles later, they were learning how wrong they had been. The Moravi suffered the most. They were an aquatic species, living their entire lives in water. Their cities were great domes on ocean worlds, beautiful and ancient and completely dependent on technology to survive. When a plague swept through their spawning pools, they turned to their medical databases for a cure. The cure existed. Human doctors had developed it 200 years earlier, during the last great outbreak. But the formula was locked behind human medical patents, and the manufacturing process required human expertise that no longer existed in the collective. The Moravi tried to recreate the medicine themselves. But they failed. They tried to buy it from other species, but no one else knew how to make it. Millions of larvae died in the first wave. Millions more died in the second. The Council of 12 met in emergency session. The great hall that had once been so proud and confident was now filled with fear and anger. Species that had been allies for thousands of years now blamed each other for the crisis. The Velthari blamed the Krith for pushing to expel the humans. The Krith blamed the Moravi for not speaking up when they had the chance. Everyone blamed the humans for leaving. This is unacceptable, the Velthari High Speaker declared. We must bring the humans back. We will send a delegation to the Outer Veil and demand that they return. Demand. The Krith representatives' mandibles clicked with bitter laughter. We threw them out. We took their homes. We treated them like dirt for 300 years. And now we will demand that they come back to save us. Then we will offer them something. Payment, land, voting rights, whatever they want. The delegation was assembled within days. The finest diplomats from 6 different species carrying gifts and promises and carefully worded apologies. They traveled to the edge of the outer veil, to the border where the last human outpost had been spotted before the convoy disappeared into the dark. They waited for 3 days before a human ship appeared. It was small and simple, nothing impressive, but it moved with a quiet confidence that made the diplomats nervous. A single human came aboard the delegation's vessel to receive them. Her name was Su Yun, and she was young, barely 40 years old. She wore a plain gray uniform with no decorations, no medals, no signs of rank. She listened politely as the diplomats made their case. She accepted their gifts with a small bow of thanks, and then she gave them her answer. "We are grateful for your kind words," she said, "but we must decline your offer. We are building something new in the outer veil. We have found that the region is not as empty as everyone believed. We wish you well in solving your problems, but we will not be returning to collective space." The diplomats were shocked. They had expected bargaining, negotiation, demands for more compensation. They had not expected a simple, polite refusal. "But you must help us," the Velthari ambassador insisted. "You have a duty. You were members of the collective." Su-Yun smiled, and there was something cold in that smile, something that made the ambassador step back without meaning to. "We were members," she agreed. "But you ended our membership when you took our homes. We owe the collective nothing. We wish you well." She bowed again, turned, and walked back to her ship. The delegation watched her go. Unable to find words, the small human vessel turned and flew back into the darkness of the outer veil, disappearing among the dead stars as if it had never existed. The ambassadors returned to the council with nothing but empty hands and a message that no one wanted to hear. The humans were not coming back. The collective would have to save itself, and in the darkness beyond the border, humanity continued to build. The outer veil was supposed to be a graveyard. Every species in the collective knew this. It was the edge of the galaxy, where old stars went to die, and nothing new could grow. The region was too far from the center of galactic civilization, too cold, too dark, too empty. Sending the humans there had been meant as a final insult, a slow death sentence that would let humanity fade away without anyone having to feel guilty about it. But the other species had forgotten something important about humans. They had forgotten that humanity had started on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They had forgotten that humans had built their first civilizations with nothing but stone tools and fire. They had forgotten that every great thing humanity had ever achieved had come from looking at impossible challenges and refusing to give up. Tae Woo-jin stood on the observation deck of New Seoul Station, the first great space station humanity had built in the outer veil. It floated in orbit around a world that human scientists had named Hope, a planet that had been dead and frozen when they arrived but was now slowly coming to life. Through the wide windows, he could see the lights of construction drones working on the surface below, building domes and farms and factories that would house millions of people. He was 72 now, his hair completely white, his face lined with age and worry and hard work. After the Exodus, he had been elected as the first president of the United Human Territories. It was a title he had never wanted, but one he had accepted because his people needed him. Now, 10 cycles after leaving the collective behind, he was finally seeing the results of all their sacrifice. "The latest population count is in," Dr. Yuna Ki said, joining him at the window. She was 83, moving slowly with the help of a cane, but her mind was as sharp as ever. 12 billion humans and growing. Birth rates are the highest they have been in 400 years. And the terraforming projects? 6 worlds are now fully habitable. 14 more are in progress. We estimate that within 20 cycles, we will have more living space than we ever had in the Orion Spur. Tae Woo-jin nodded slowly. When they had first arrived in the outer veil, the situation had looked hopeless. The region was exactly as dark and cold and empty as everyone had said. But human scientists had begun to explore anyway, sending probes into the darkness, searching for anything that might help them survive. What they found had changed everything. The outer veil was not empty at all. It was simply different from the rest of the galaxy. The stars here were old and dim, but they were stable, burning slowly and steadily for billions of years. The planets were cold, but many of them held vast reserves of water ice and frozen gases that could be melted and used. And deep beneath the surfaces of several moons, human probes discovered something that no other species had ever found: deposits of a mineral that human scientists called stellarite, a substance that could store and release enormous amounts of energy with almost perfect efficiency. With stellarite, the darkness of the outer veil became an advantage instead of a problem. Human engineers built power plants that could light entire worlds. Human farmers created underground gardens that grew food without sunlight. Human builders constructed cities that did not need stars to survive. The graveyard became a garden, and the garden kept growing. But the greatest discovery came 5 cycles after the Exodus, when Commander Mina Su led an exploration fleet into the deepest part of the outer veil. Mina was Hanasu's daughter, born during the long journey from the Orion Spur. She had never known any home but human ships and stations, and she had grown up with a hunger to see what lay beyond the next horizon. Her fleet found the rift. It was a network of stable wormholes, natural tunnels through space that connected the outer veil to regions of the galaxy that no species had ever reached. The rift had been there for millions of years, hidden in the darkness, waiting for someone brave enough to look for it. Beyond the rift lay star systems rich with resources, worlds perfect for human life, and vast stretches of space that belonged to no one. "They sent us to a prison," Mina told her crew when they realized what they had found, "and we discovered that the prison had a back door to paradise." News of the rift spread quickly through the human territories. Ships were built. Expeditions were launched. Colony after colony was established on worlds that made the Orion Spur look small and poor by comparison. Within a few cycles, humanity controlled more space than the entire galactic collective combined. Meanwhile, back in collective territory, the collapse continued. The Velthari Empire, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, had split into 3 warring factions. The Krith Trade Federation had dissolved completely. Its great trading houses bankrupted and abandoned. The Moravi had sealed their borders and refused to communicate with anyone, struggling just to keep their species alive. Desperate refugees began to appear at the borders of the outer veil. Some were workers, skilled engineers and scientists who had learned from human teachers before the Exodus. Others were merchants, hoping to trade with the new human civilization. A few were diplomats, still trying to convince humanity to return and save what was left of the collective. The human government debated what to do with these visitors. Some argued that they should be turned away, left to suffer the consequences of their species' arrogance. Others argued that humans were better than that they should show mercy even to those who had shown them none. In the end, President Taewoo-jin made the decision himself. "We will accept refugees who come in peace," he announced. "We will trade with those who treat us fairly. We will help those who ask for help honestly. But we will not return to the collective. We will not fix their problems for them. They must learn to stand on their own, just as we did." It was a fair decision, but it was also a hard one. It meant watching the collective continue to fall, while humanity continued to rise. It meant accepting that some species might not survive. It meant choosing the future over the past. On the observation deck of New Seoul Station, Taewoo-jin watched the lights of construction drones working below. Somewhere out there, beyond the rift, human ships were exploring worlds that had never felt the touch of any living thing. Somewhere out there, children were being born who would never know what it meant to be called a lesser species. "They thought they were punishing us," he said quietly. Yunaki stood beside him, her old eyes bright with something that might have been joy or might have been tears. "They set us free," she replied. "They just did not know it." 20 cycles had passed since humanity's quiet departure, and the galactic collective no longer existed. The great council hall where the Velthari had once pronounced judgment on lesser species was now a ruin. Its floating crystals had fallen and shattered on the floor. Its high walls had cracked and crumbled. Weeds grew through the broken stones, and small animals made nests in the thrones where mighty beings had once sat. The building that had been designed to make visitors feel small now made everyone who saw it feel sad. The Velthari High Speaker sat alone in what remained of his private chamber. He was old now, older than any of his kind had ever lived before. His crystal body was cracked in a dozen places, held together only by metal bands that human engineers had once designed. Without human medicine to heal him, he was slowly falling apart. Piece by piece, on a small screen in front of him, he watched a broadcast from the human territories. A woman named Han Ara was speaking. She was the current president of the United Human Territories, elected 50 years after the Exodus. She was young and strong and confident, and she spoke with the voice of a species that had found its place in the universe. They called us lesser, Han Ara said. They told us we were unremarkable, fragile, short-lived, emotional. And perhaps we are all of these things. Perhaps we are everything they said we were, but we have something they never understood. The high speaker leaned forward, his cracked body groaning with the movement. We adapt. Han Ara continued. We endure, we remember, and we never, ever stop building. Today, we celebrate the 20th anniversary of our departure from collective space. We celebrate not with anger or triumph, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the struggle that made us strong. Gratitude for the darkness that taught us to make our own light. Gratitude for the enemies who, without meaning to, gave us the greatest gift any species can receive. They gave us a reason to become the best version of ourselves. The broadcast showed images of human cities on 100 different worlds, children playing in parks under artificial suns, families eating dinner together in homes carved from alien stone, ships traveling through the rift to explore regions of the galaxy that no other species had ever seen. It was a vision of a civilization that had not just survived its exile but had been transformed by it. The high speaker turned off the screen. He could not bear to watch anymore. Around him, the Velthari Empire had shattered into pieces. 3 factions fought endlessly over the scraps of what had once been the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Billions had died in the wars. Billions more had fled to other species, begging for shelter. The Velthari homeworld itself was a wasteland, its atmosphere poisoned by weapons that no one knew how to repair. The Krith had retreated to their original planet, a small world in a forgotten corner of the former collective. Their great trading houses were gone. Their ships were rusting in abandoned ports. They survived now by selling whatever they could find to human merchants who controlled all the major trade routes. Once, they had looked down on humans as useful servants. Now, they depended on human charity to eat. The Moravi were barely alive. The plague that had killed their larvae had never been fully cured. Each generation was smaller than the last. Scientists estimated that within 100 cycles, there would be no Moravi left at all. Their great underwater cities stood empty, monuments to a species that had been too proud to ask for help until it was too late. 3 other species had already gone extinct. Their worlds were empty, their histories forgotten, their names spoken only in old records that no one read anymore. They had depended on human technology, human medicine, human knowledge, and when those things disappeared, they had no way to save themselves. On a small hill outside New Seoul, on a world that humans had built from nothing, an old man sat with his great-grandchildren. His name was Dae Hyun, and he was 127 years old. Human medicine had advanced far beyond what it had been in the days of the collective. People lived longer now, healthier lives and stronger bodies. Dae Hyun remembered everything. He remembered Earth. He remembered the cherry trees of Old Seoul. He remembered being the last person to leave, planting a small device in the frozen ground as a promise to return. Grandfather, one of the children asked, a little girl with dark eyes and curious questions. Why did we leave? Why didn't we fight them? Dae Hyun smiled. It was a question he had been asked many times over the years. Because fighting would have meant becoming like them, he said. It would have meant using our strength to hurt and destroy. We did not want that. We wanted to build. We wanted to create. We wanted to show the universe that there was a better way. But they were mean to us, the girl said. They took our home. Yes, they did. And for a long time, that made us very sad. But then we realized something important. Home is not a place. Home is the people you love and the things you build together. We carried our home with us when we left. We planted it in new soil and watched it grow into something more beautiful than anything we had before. The children thought about this. Above them, the stars of the outer veil shone bright and clear. each one a marker of a world where humans now lived and worked and dreamed. Will we ever go back to Earth? Another child asked. Dae-hyun was quiet for a moment. The device he had planted so many years ago was still there, waiting in the frozen soil of Old Seoul. One day, humans would return to their first home. One day, they would plant new cherry trees and rebuild the cities their ancestors had left behind. But not yet. Not until they were ready. Not until they had become everything they were meant to be. Someday, he said finally, when the time is right, Earth is waiting for us, and she is very patient. Far away, in the ruins of the council hall, the Velthari High Speaker closed his eyes and thought about the day humanity had stood before him. Small and quiet and accepting. He had thought they were defeated. He had thought they were broken. He had thought he was sending them to their death. Now he understood the truth. He had not defeated them. He had not broken them. He had simply set them free from a cage they had outgrown. And in doing so, he had sealed the fate of everyone who had ever looked down on the quiet little species from the unremarkable planet orbiting the ordinary star. They had watched humanity depart quietly, and they had realized their mistake too late.